Awesome. Thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody. Before we get started, I just want to thank Megan for doing a phenomenal job of getting this together and preparing us. You know, I've done a lot of these, as I'm sure Doug has, and Megan really put together a great webinar for us with some great questions and a good flow. So thanks, Megan, for that and her team. My name is Dan Sixsmith. I'm the SVP of Value here at Mediafly. I lead our value selling practice and subject matter expert in value. And I've been with the organization for coming up on 6 years and in the value space for, gosh, maybe 14, 15 years. And I'm so happy to have with me Doug May, who is someone that I've known for probably 10 years. And when I think about value selling, scaling value practices, and just overall business success, Doug is probably the first name that comes to mind. So Doug, welcome. Glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, Dan. Excited to be here. And thank you for the super kind words. It's hard to think about, but as we get old, we've done a lot of stuff, haven't we?
Yeah, it's scary when I start talking about the number of years and
exactly.
want to pump the brakes a little bit sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, let's slow that down. Why don't we do that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So just give us a little background. You've had some tremendous success. Talk a little bit about your career, kind of leading up to where you are today. I know you have a brand new job. We'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, when I think about it, back to the years, I've been sort of in technology in a sales and go-to-market capacity for over 30 years. And rather than telling everybody about every job I had, I think it's better to sort of bucket it into 3 phases. Of course, when you graduate from college, you have no experience pretty much. So I just got directly into sales. And so I was a rep for 10 years and really enjoyed that, helping customers solve problems, winning and competing and all the good things that go with that. But I wanted to help people a little bit more. And what I found is a great way to do that was to get into leadership. So I spent the next 12 years as a sales leader, hiring, developing, coaching talent, and delivering, results as a team, ultimately leading global sales for 2 companies. And that was really fulfilling and exciting. Much of that time I spent in startups, and I mean zero revenue startups. So the early days and trying to get something off the ground and all that. But what I found, even with the ability to help a number of salespeople as a head of sales, there was still a number of other things that I wanted to do more to help these sales teams be successful. So the third phase of my career is being a go-to-market leader, where I've sort of built and run a lot of the supporting functions that help to drive, productivity and success in the field. Everything from business value teams, enablement teams, specialist teams, industry teams, they're just a whole bunch of that. And so it's been incredibly fulfilling when you are now able to help every employee in the go-to-market succeed, do their jobs easier, faster, and at higher success rates. And so it's been really, really fulfilling. So I'm in the third phase. I don't know if there'll be a fourth phase. I don't think we're probably going to be good at this one. But also just recently joined Harness, so I'm very excited to be here. I'm their Senior Vice President of Productivity, and I will be building and leading those functions that provide the leverage. And the leverage is all about driving what I feel is the single most important metric in a software business, and that's sales productivity. Harness in particular, it's a great story. We're modernizing the software development lifecycle, and of course being led by Jody Bonsall, who is the founder and CEO of App Dynamics, and he's now solving the next wave of problems he needs to solve with a huge commitment to excellence in product. I've also joined an incredible chief revenue officer named Carlos Della Torre, who I've worked for before. Carlos was the original CRO who took MongoDB public as an example. So really understands scale and success. And John Bonney, our CFO. So when I think about, the exec team is very strong and proven they've done it before. The second thing about Harness, I'll say, is the trajectory of the business. They've gone, 0 to 100 million plus in just about 5 years, I should say. And there's only been about 9 SaaS startups to do it that fast. So there's really, really great product market fit. And the company is committed to continuing to deliver great products and to execute in the go-to-market with excellence. And so really, really excited to be at Harness. And thanks for having me, Dan, and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations on that. You've been on
Yeah,
a couple of
thanks.
other rocket ships, and sounds like you're on another one. So that's really, really exciting. So let's talk about, kind of the flow for today. I think we're going to break this into 3 different parts. We're going to start out, level setting around, what is exactly value selling. We're going to ask Doug what his definition is of it. I'll chime in as well. And we're going to talk about the impact of value selling when it's done well. And then lastly, we're going to talk about, how do we scale value effectively across the organization? What does it take to put together a program to stand it up, but then actually get it to scale and be successful? So those will be kind of the big pillars we'll be discussing today. Please, add questions as we're going along, because we'll have a Q&A at the end. But I think, Megan, we want to start off with a poll just so we could see what our audience is in terms of maturity level of understanding value selling and value programs.
Yes, that
So
should be live
go ahead.
now.
Yep. We don't answer, right?
No, I mean, you can. It would be interesting. I think that would skew our results a little bit. All
I
right.
like these polls because we can tailor the conversation a little bit.
Absolutely.
See if we have.
Okay. We'll give about 5 more seconds for people to get their answers in. Almost everybody's in right now. So, all right. I'm going to call it.
All right. What you got?
Share results here. So we've got a couple folks are here really trying to learn and get familiar with value selling, but the vast majority, over half, about 54%, have some understanding but are still early stages in their program. Or wait, no. Yeah, early stages of their program. So this will be a good opportunity to dig in. This will be a great conversation.
Yeah.
And we've got some well-established program folks in here as well. Awesome. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us. So, Doug, let's start out. If you run into somebody in the elevator and they ask you, what is value selling and why is it important? What's your take at this stage of your career? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I really think of value selling in 3 ways. First, I'd say it's fundamentally focusing on the customer's business problems and not your product. It's unfortunate, but over decades in my career, as many sales enablement teams have invested so much time teaching salespeople the product, the features, the functions, the competitive differences. The customer doesn't really care about your product. They have a problem to solve, and they're looking for a set of capabilities that'll help them solve that problem. And it's that business problem, right? And it's got some challenges to it, which is really the second piece. So the first is, support, going after the customer's business problem, put your product to the side. The second is, while you uncover the challenges that's causing the business problem, now you got to gather some of the metrics and quantify the value that's being lost or what value could be gained with the solution. So it's their business problem. What are the challenges? And then the third piece, and really, frankly, what I think is the most important part of this, is socializing the overall proposition. You got to gain the buy-in to the business problem, make sure that they agree that it exists and that they want to solve it. And the second one is, what's the cost of doing nothing, or what value can they gain, right? So it's got to be that quantified piece, and they have to agree with the data inputs and assumptions made. That whole process of socializing is critical. You can't do a value selling program by just generating numbers that go into some magic spreadsheet or tool and come out the other end and say, oh, you're going to save $5 million if you implement our solution, because the customer's not going to believe it. And they have to instead be involved in the process. They have to provide you the data. They have to review the preliminary result before it goes forward. So that socializing piece, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And when it works well, it's collaborative, and there are a couple of things you said there. Number one, I think one of the biggest issues we see is that, you know, how do you find a problem worth solving? So, one of the things you talked about was the cost of doing nothing. Really being able to highlight the impact of not solving that challenge, I think is certainly one of the things that we've seen as be a little more impactful. The other thing I've heard you say on other podcasts is the kind of notion of slowing down to speed up, and I
Hmm.
really like that. Give us a little more color on what you mean by that, and how it's worked for you in the past.
Yeah. The one thing we try to do with the sales process when we implement it and then we teach people, here are the steps, here are the exit criteria, these are the activities that you should do at each phase of the process. The reason we're doing that is to help them, that sales team, avoid roadblocks, detours, barriers, things that get in the way. Um, Inevitably, I think the data says it, it's somewhere north of 85% of all technology decisions over $50,000 require financial justification. So if you're not doing it at all, you've got your 250K, your 500K or $1 million deal. By the time it gets to the person, the executive who's got to approve it, if you haven't done that work, someone's going to have to do it, which means if you forecasted the deal and you haven't done that work, your deal's not going to come in on time. And I've seen this happen many times. It doesn't come in on time because on the last day of the quarter, you're asking the COO to sign it. And they say, I'm happy to sign it. This is a great project. We want to do it. Where's the business case? Where's the justification? And then the champion and the salesperson look at each other. Their faces turn white because they know it's going to take them now a little bit of time to go build that. So if you do that early on, you can basically avoid the speed bumps, the roadblocks, the detours.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've seen an uptick in value selling and value selling programs and interest in it. I'm going to ask you your opinion certainly on why that is. I mean, I think certainly one of the things that we're seeing is that, when money was free flowing and the economy was great, I think even the mediocre sellers were doing well, right? You think about the real estate explosion, right, during the pandemic, and even
Yeah.
the mediocre to non-existent brokers were making a fortune. But now, money is tight. Decisions are being made by multiple stakeholders, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different personas. Um, so I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons. But why else do you think we're getting this big kind of renewed and new interest in value selling?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things happening. Certainly economic forces, as you pointed out, are always going to be an issue. If things are great, if we're in that sort of times are good and everyone's eating well and everyone's able to travel and do things, there's a lot less scrutiny that gets put into what we spend money on as organizations, um, because the list of things is always very long. But the economic times will tell you what amount of that list, how many of those investment opportunities are we going to be able to take advantage of? Just to make it sort of silly, but when times are crazy, there could be 50 projects that all get funded and everything's great and everybody's happy, right? It's kind of like if you have some financial success in your life, all of a sudden, yeah, let's do the landscaping at the house, let's put the pool in. You'd kind of like things flow a little bit more. But as soon as things tighten up, you have to realize that you can only invest in those top most important things. So in our households, we have to determine what those are. And if we're living on our own, there's a committee of one. If we're in the family, we have to work with the family and determine and agree on what those are. In companies, that's what the exec team does. They work on what are the top priorities that we're going to go, that we have to do. What are the things we have to do this year? And if you're not attaching your project to something on that list, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the chance to get your deal in. It doesn't mean you'll never close the deal. It means that you're more likely to have your deal push or have it, be that thing where they say, you know what, we really love this. It's great, but I think we're going to look at doing it next quarter or next year. when you have a project that's aligned to the top priority of an organization, it doesn't matter what economic forces there are. It doesn't matter, because if it's in the top three, they have to do it. These are survival sorts of things, whether that be saving money, accelerating revenue, opening new markets. These are things that, the board level and the C-suite, are getting compensated on, but also that's their job, is to really focus on the most important things for their organization, whether times are good or whether they're bad. So I think that's sort of the big one, the big obvious one. We go through these economic cycles. We've seen, the boom of 20 and 21, the COVID induced, economic boom. We've also seen the downfall of a recession. We've seen 2008 in the real estate. We saw the bubble in the 90s burst at the end there. So there have been times of great richness and wealth, and times of real tight budgets. I've sold through all of them successfully, because if you do these things, this value selling method, you don't have to worry about the economy, because you're basically approaching it with, I'm always attaching to one of the top three things in my customer. And as a result of that, I'm sort of recession proof, if that makes sense. So that's the first one. Second one, I would say, is sort of, the way people buy is very, very different these days. When I started my career, we were doing all the education on the customer with the solution. We were showing up, we were doing the demos and the PowerPoints and all of those sorts of things, because the customer had an incredibly limited ability to do any product research. In fact, typically it would either be they've had experience with products before, so they knew them, or they were connecting with their community long before LinkedIn, and asking them, hey, what do you do for this? And what do you do for that? And they're getting recommendations, because the internet hadn't yet become the incredible resource that it is today. Buyers today are basically, handling probably more than half of the buying journey on their own. There's review sites. I can get free demos and trials. There's white papers. There's so much information available. So now the way in which we can really differentiate ourselves as great sales teams is to really do the connection for the customer, why this particular product and solution meets the needs that will help them achieve that strategic business outcome that is on the top three list. And so that's where I think this interest in value selling and a shift in how we teach people to sell, and what we expect them to do as great sellers has shifted. So I don't know. What do you think, Dan? What have you seen?
Yeah, no, I mean, no, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing we keep pointing back to is that buyers are asking for this, right? You look at all the research, but unfortunately, sellers aren't delivering value, because the majority of buyers are saying they want a seller-free experience if they could. They want to do like e-commerce equivalent for B2B. They have more information than ever before, and they feel that sellers aren't adding value. They're either regurgitating some of the information that they've already seen or read, and they're just not, they're looking for more of a strategic advisor or a subject matter expert.
That would be a
They're not
value
looking
seller,
for
I think,
somebody.
right?
Right, exactly. So, so that's, that's one of the big things that I think we have to really work hard to change, and get more people involved in it. The other thing is, and I'd love your take, is, since the pandemic, the C-suite is 2 times as likely now to be involved in decisions than they were before. So what we're seeing is value selling, A, gets you access to the C-suite if you do it right. And then B, helps you have an intelligent, on the same level conversation with a senior executive. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, so what I would say is 2 things there. One is, it's really hard to get to these people now. Really, really hard. And you're right, they're involved in way more decisions. Sales teams are having a real problem gaining access to them. And the reason is they don't have a message for those people. And listen, if I'm an exec and I don't know something, like I don't, let's use Harness as an example. Let's say I don't really know the depths of what it takes to, publish and push out code and do, you know, some chaos engineering, you know, to protect ourselves. Like if I have no idea what is involved in that, I don't want to meet a salesperson and an SE who are going to try to dig deep into the product, because it's going to embarrass me. I'm going to be exposed. You know, I have an executive job and responsibility and I can make a decision, but I don't know the details. So we want to make sure that when we speak to an economic buyer, a decision maker, that we're speaking their language and that we're able to do the translation. And if you think of the three fundamentals of value selling, I talked about it: customer's problem, what are the challenges in the way, and how do we quantify the impact of that? And who in my organization have you talked to and have agreed to this? That's how you can get around the discomfort that might exist and encourage that executive to spend time with you. I've done the work in the organization to do the translation for you, and I'm going to come explain to you why this is going to help you achieve one of your top 3 business objectives, and why this financial investment is going to return for you greater than anything else.
Yeah, without a doubt. And the other thing is, like, you know, more people need to do it, but today it's a differentiator. You know, not
Totally.
everyone is a value seller. So when you see it, even when people are trying to sell to me or to you, you can tell, and you're like, wow, they stand out.
Yeah.
Because today it's a lot of feature function, it's a lot of cursory discovery where it's like I'm not even listening. You know, I'm just kind of throwing a few questions out, and can we get that PowerPoint thrown up here? And so I feel more comfortable, right? So
Yeah.
there's work that goes into it if you're a seller, but I think the rewards certainly will be great. And that kind of leads us into the next phase of the conversation. So when this works well, what is the potential impact? You know, you've been in a couple of tremendous success stories. Tell us about that a little bit, and how the value programs took off to drive tremendous growth for 2, you know, incredible companies.
Right. So we're talking about my time at Splunk and at Databricks, but what I can tell you is, so the first one, which to me, if I'm a seller and I'm either being asked to learn a new skill like value selling, or I'm just trying to improve the outcome that I get myself. So it's not an organizational thing. I think we need to understand that we don't win every opportunity that we engage in. But if we could win more of them, would you be willing to learn a new skill to do that? If I could tell you that you could win 5 times more often, as we did at Databricks, would you be willing to think about a new way of doing something? Would you be willing to think about doing a little bit of research on your account to understand what those top initiatives are in the account? Would you be willing to do a little bit more work to ask the right questions while you're doing discovery with the customer and they're telling about the challenge in their current environment? Would you ask them, hey, how many outages do you have? How long do they last? And how many people are involved? And what's the business impact? Would you be willing to do that if you could close, you know, 5 times more often? It was unbelievable, the work that we did. And this was across over 1,000 value assessments. So value selling applied to Databricks led us to a greater than 5 times improvement in the win rate, which means every seller that went through the process, just, you know, they were converted. Because now instead, you know, if you're winning, you know, 15% of the time and then you win 75% of the time, it's like, you know, night and day. These people, it's life-changing, because you went from maybe being 60 or 80% of your quota to being 150 or 200% consistently. And it's something that will not only serve you in your current job, but serve you across that. I think the other thing, the other impact, so that's for the seller, right? So that, and by the way, at Splunk, the impacts were a little different, but it was more about accelerating the sales cycle. That, you know, we avoided the obstacle of the, you know, the elephant in the room is someone's going to ask us, hey, this Splunk tool is really great, everyone loves it, but it's expensive. Well, if you've handled that work in your process, when that objection comes up, you know, great, let's have the champion come in and explain the analysis and the assessment we've done, translating the technical challenges into value. And then, you know, the C-suite or whoever it is that has to make that approval, you know, they're defenseless, and we've made it easy for them to say yes. I think that's really one of the things I think about value selling. It's like, we're trying to make it easy for people to say yes, right? So the sales impact is huge. The second part is really for our champions, for these technical leaders who are in their companies, tasked with solving challenges around process or quality or security or whatever it may be. We're helping give them the talk track and the translation of that business, of that technical problem to the business. And it really helps them because it gives them the ability to go talk to their executives or to their boardroom. We're providing the translation on why it matters. And what happens with that, it's kind of like the halo effect. If I'm a developer or I'm leading an SRE team or a development team, and I bring, the CI/CD solution from Harness up to the, to the executives, and I don't go deep in talking about the technology, but rather I explain the problems, what impact they're having on the business, and how solving them with our solution will help us achieve one of those top 3 initiatives. All of a sudden the executive says, wow, this person who I thought was just a technical person really understands the business. These people often get promoted. So these champions who engage with us and do the work with value selling and translating the technical message to business and prioritizing it to the strategy, their careers are changed too. So now we've got sales careers changing, we've got the technical careers changing. And really what we're doing through this whole process too, and Dan, you said it so well, we're differentiating ourselves, but we're able to turn someone who might have just been using a checklist or a requirements list to go buy something into a real champion. We're turning them, right, buyers to champions, and we're making them, champions of the project, because now that big corporate initiative is actually something that, a technical leader can actually embrace and say, I'm solving that big important thing, as well as they're champions for the solution. And as you know, I think the old saying goes, no champion, no deal. So as sellers, and we need these people. So what better than to help them talk to their execs, help them be seen, help your sales process go faster, the deal get bigger and win more often. It's sort of like mind blowing when I have people consider not doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it seems obvious almost, right?
It seems it. Yeah.
It's a struggle,
It can be. It absolutely can be.
Which, yeah, I mean, think about what you just said, and how the seller in this process now elevates themselves into almost an extension of the buying committee and the team. They're providing such a valuable service that it's like night and day versus someone that's just there for a commission and trying to talk about features and functions. It's really, someone said that if you do this value selling process well, and it's not all about numbers, right? A lot of what you talked about is the strategic discovery, and the messaging and the storytelling and highlighting a problem. And then, when you work well together, they almost want the numbers to work out.
Of course.
They feel so, they're like, this has got to, everyone's bought in, and it's like, these numbers we're going to work on together, and we want this to work, which is great.
I can give you a real great example, Dan. When I was at BMC right after the BladeLogic acquisition, this is probably running on 15, 16 years ago. We were working with Verizon on a really big server automation opportunity. We had done the work on the business case. So we had done the interviews. We really had done the translation. And we were presenting to the SVP, I think, of the Unix systems team, who had, 30,000 servers and data centers across. So, it's a really important person, the economic buyer for this opportunity. We had done such a good job with the socializing part of this, with the champions and having them. So they all prepped this person before the meeting. We had validated all the data. We had done the great POC. So the technology had been proven out, right? Value selling doesn't mean we don't do POCs. We still need to do those. There's sort of the emotional buying part and the rational buying part, and we need to prove that it works. But while we were presenting, I'll tell you this, and it's the reality. I noticed that in my calculation, one of the numbers was wrong. But the story was so strong. The executive asked their questions and tested where they had to test. They didn't see the error, but they were like, great, let's go do this. Now, when I got off the call, I fixed the number and made sure that what we sent them was the accurate thing. But I think exactly to your point, it's when they believe this. And this is why, again, that third part of value selling being that socialization. We're dealing with humans here. Humans are emotional beings. Humans are doing things for all sorts of purposes. And we need to find ways to sort of get them to believe. And when they believe in something, and that's either they've seen the technology and they know it's going to solve the problem, they've seen the business case and like, wow, look at the return and look at the savings we're going to get. Those things matter because then they move forward and they press to go get something done and to help, make that change occur in the organization.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you could see it in certain deals that are just moving and the team is engaged and they're pushing, and then others that are not. So something's wrong there. Either it's us on our end, or maybe it's not a real issue,
Yeah.
or problem. So, impact wise, so many great things we talked about. Win rate for sure. Certainly the getting stall deals moved out of kind of the
Yeah.
stall category, right? Establishing a, need to have a why now, which is one where the research says the sellers struggle a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly average selling price is another good one. Any other impact or anything from your experiences that you can highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I just think again, sort of the sales cycle time, average order size is going up.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is if you've got a platform product or you've got a product with multiple modules and you're scoping one of those modules, but you find a business problem that generates, let's say, $10 million and your software is only 100K,
Mm-hmm.
a great champion or even a great seller might suggest, hey, there's a couple of other capabilities that we could deliver. Why don't we make it part of this proposal? Since there's a huge amount of value to be gained, let's include some of these additional capabilities since we have a great financial justification. And a fantastic champion will be all in on that because they believe and they want to do great things for their organization. So yeah, I think that one for sure can occur. And I've seen that at Splunk. And then, of course, your win rate. So like these are three of the biggest levers for sales teams. And the key, of course, is doing this not just one rep at a time, but how can we do this across the entirety of our sales ecosystem for our commercial sellers, our mid-market sellers, our enterprise sellers, and how do we get value injected into the deals, more often? If we can hit 50%, 60, 80%, that's when the real impact occurs.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that's going to lead us nicely into our next segment of this, right? How do you, as a value leader, right? If you come in and we have so many, companies we deal with, many having success, others struggling a little bit to get value adopted and scaled across the organization. So I think we're going to jump on a poll next to see what some of our audience members are experiencing, and then we'll jump back in on the rest of the interview.
Yes, let me get this next poll launched. All right, so this one is asking, what is the biggest challenge your organization is facing as you look to scale your program? As Doug just said, it's amazing when these wins happen at an individual seller level, but it can be so much more impactful when it's scaled across the entire sales force. But what are those pieces that are holding you back right now?
Yeah, and I've seen all of these. These are, and I've seen them firsthand, and I've seen them through many of my colleagues across the industry who we stay in touch with and talk about and share secrets with. Yeah, these are real. These are real.
Awesome. Let's give about 30 more seconds for folks to get their votes in. We're almost to full participation. So let's get those last few stragglers and we'll call this. All right, let's see. It's a pretty mixed bag here. Low seller adoption coming in with half of our votes today, but
Yeah.
limited resources and lack of executive buy-in coming in hot as well. So
Love it.
awesome.
I think that's
Thank
pretty
you.
amazing
Not
because,
surprised.
yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, it's pretty telling. I mean, I think, seeing all these, we can, resources are always a challenge. It doesn't matter, what you're doing. If you're trying to build a development team or whether you're trying to build a value team, there is a CFO back there saying, well, how does this investment actually make me money? And it's tough. So, value engineers, value consultants, they're definitely a finite resource, and they can be really hard to get. And when you have them, of course, they can only sit on so many calls or engage in so many deals. So, one of the key ways to overcome that is, you have to figure out how the best practices and the mindset of a value consultant can be embedded in, everything that the salesperson does. We do not want, value selling or building of a business case to be a point in time, that occurs during a sales process. It's not an event or, a checkbox sort of thing. It's something that goes across it. So fundamentally, you've got to have the buy-in from your exec team on down that we're teaching people this skill and it's embedded in what we do. And let me give you a couple examples. When we do research on an account, a lot of times the salespeople are looking for contacts, certain personas. They're looking for certain technologies, maybe things that are indicative of, if they have this tool, they'll buy our tool. Or if they have that tool, I can replace it. And the sellers spend an awful lot of time on that stuff. And I find it's very good, that technical landscape, the technology landscape, who's who in the zoo, the people, all that. The one thing that sellers don't spend as much time on is researching the business. How do they make money? What trajectory is the company on? What's their financial position? What are their top initiatives? And that research can be hard, but really great enablement programs are teaching sellers how to do this themselves. So that first part of value selling about, we got to focus on the customer's problem. I think great enablement organizations are embedding that into their onboarding and their teaching, and it's embedded in the sales process. So that's just an example where we do that. Of course, we also teach them how to do discovery, and value is embedded in that, because when they talk about a problem, whenever you hear the word outage, I spent a lot of years in observability, which is all about making things available and performant and all that stuff. When you hear the word outage as a seller, you should stop. Before you ask the next question, say, oh, you had an outage recently. Tell me about it. How long was it? How did it happen? How many people were involved in fixing it? How many customers were affected? What was the cost of that? Can you guess or estimate? You've got to capture it right when they're vulnerable, when the customer is sort of sharing, hey, here's the problem I have. And if you hear about, oh, we always have, it takes us forever to solve a problem. Stop as a seller. Don't just take that statement. Ask for the metrics while you're doing it in discovery. So I've just given sort of two examples where you embed value in the process. We haven't even done the demo yet. Haven't done the POC, haven't put a quote together yet. So value selling, when it's done great, is embedded in there. And that's how you get sort of, people doing it without costing you any more money. That's sort of the first part. The second piece of that, I think, which is really important, is once you understand the recurring benefits, the common benefits that customers are getting from your platform. So if you're early days of your company or early days of your value program, you might have done 10 or 20 or 50 BVAs. At some point, you start to see patterns. And when you see those patterns, that's what you need to start doubling down on, is teaching people those patterns, standardizing the calculations, and then, in the ideal cases, you automate those. You put them in a powerful tool, because in order to get seller adoption, and this is addressing sort of what people were saying in the quiz, the seller adoption, the first part is it's got to be in the process. So it's kind of like sneaking vegetables into your kid's meal and they don't know they're there. It's just part of the process. We're going to teach you how to do discovery and research. We're going to teach you how to, hold these various meetings, and value is embedded in that. So that's the first part. The second part then is, when you have the patterns, automate them. But the key to that is you got to make it easy. The sales persona is an interesting persona. And I can talk about it because I was a seller for 10 years and I managed them for, another 12. And then, here in the last 12 years or so, I've also been sort of supporting them. If you make something easy for sellers, they will do it. They see the result and it's easy to get there. They're always looking for the fast path to success. When you present them with a spreadsheet that has expand and collapse things on the sides, if you've got multiple tabs, if it's possible for them to enter data but do it wrong or delete something in the sheet, like all these things are very intimidating to sellers. So when you can extract that complexity and make it easy, you can build a tool where they can actually do their job, the regular discovery they are doing, and capture that information and put it into the tool and generate a professional output as if a value consultant or value engineer had been there doing the interviews and creating the slides. And this is what we've done with you, Dan, as you know very well, at Splunk and Databricks, and had just had outrageous success. So seller adoption at Splunk, the first year that we launched this platform, we called it the Interactive Value Assessment. We had 1,751 actual business cases built by our sellers that were not touched by the value consulting team. So when you start to talk about scale, when you do it right and you make it simple and it's embedded in your selling process, when you provide that tool and they see the output and they see the customer's reaction on the other side and how it impacts the deal, you're done. You've got that seller adoption taken care of. So I'll stop on that one first, Dan, before I go to anything else. Anything you want to add there?
No, I mean, exactly right. And that's what we've, we strive to do when we create these tools collaboratively with our customers. I hate to call them calculators.
No, they're not.
Because, I think the biggest thing to know is that the way we've created them and with you in the past is that you don't have to have a PhD in calculus. You don't have to be intimidated. You just need to be able to go through a compelling discovery, have some messaging, connect in with, the buyer around pains, and then work collaboratively on the numbers. And, that's where we've had the success in programs that you've worked with us and others, where the sellers can now be self-sufficient. You don't have to hire another 30 to 50 value engineers, and they're out there differentiating and, improving their win rate. So,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so make it easy. That's how you get the seller adoption embedded in your process. I think that's incredibly helpful. The automation makes it so easy. And once they go through it, they're good. I think, for some of the other challenges that we saw listed there, the lack of maybe executive buy-in, the one thing you've got to do. So for a lot of people on the webinar, you've already started, which is outstanding because, taking the first step is hard. Getting the buy-in for that is incredibly difficult. But now you're being watched, now you're under the lens. And so you have to make sure that you're capturing the impact. One of the things that, is so important to do there is when you're doing a value assessment, that you have a way of, marking your CRM solution that the value team has been engaged. The way we did it at Splunk and Databricks was to create a request form in Salesforce, which was our CRM, and then people were able to request our services. And then when we delivered the service, we clicked on a box and we finished it. Then we could run all sorts of reports. Now, obviously, with the Mediafly solution too, which was great, it's all integrated. So the beauty of that was that, when a value consultant was not engaged, I had data on that too. I could show very clearly the win rate for a deal when the value consultant was engaged in versus the win rate when they weren't. At Databricks, it was 5.8 times. With the tool, though, we could do the same thing, or the application, we did the same thing. We could measure that. And I think it was about 5.5 times. It was unbelievable. So it was uncanny. And this was finally the thing for our CFO, which said, okay, if the value consultants have a big win rate, I might think that you're fixing the system, right? The system's a little rigged. You're just attaching to those really golden special deals. And you're part of the team. And of course you're helping, but we'd get that deal anyways. But when the seller chooses on their own to use the tool and has the same rate of success effectively, right, 5 times, like that's fully defensible. So data is critical here to gaining executive buy-in, whether you're doing it with people and spreadsheets or whether you're doing it with the application. And I think that's the key is instrument your program so that you have the data for those people.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And we've continued to build out that whole data and analytics piece in our platform to give the value leaders, the ability to say, here's the impact we've had. And not only that, but to maybe jump in on deals that currently are in flight that don't have value, and where we can potentially jump in and help with the business case. So,
Yeah.
Doug,
Dan,
as
I've got a
always,
quick,
this is
quick
phenomenal.
story that might be fun.
Yeah, love it.
When we first launched the first version of our solution, the interactive value assessment at Splunk, I remember getting an email from a rep who was in our commercial team. And they told me that they had a deal that had pushed for 3 quarters in a row. And it was like, it wasn't big. It was, $40K or something like that. It pushed 3 quarters in a row. So we launched the tool and the rep got smart and said, hey, I'm going to get my champion on the phone and say, hey, would it help you if we could put together the story and show you the numbers in the context? Would you sit on a WebEx with me and or Zoom? I can't remember what it was, but so they basically filled it out together, generated the PowerPoint output, which is a professional output. It looks so amazing. They got the deal done that quarter, and he attributed it entirely to the fact that he had not been able to provide that before because it was such a daunting task to them. I mean, as a commercial seller, they only have a few years experience. They're not a 20-year vet who's done big deals and understands how to do some of this stuff. And so that's the kind of thing that you can have an impact on. And when you capture that and capture those success stories, you have the data and all of that. It's really, the thing's going to have such momentum behind it. It's almost like anyone that stands in the way is going to kind of be looking at like, why are you trying to slow this down? Why are you not investing in this? Why are you not supporting this? Because it's doing so well for the company.
That's phenomenal. I love that story. Perfect. Well, I think we're gonna stop here and take some questions. We've had a great session. We thank you for that, Doug. Megan, I'm gonna turn it back to you for any Q&A we have.
Yes, we've got a great question from Tom about the importance of a value office charter. How can a value office charter ensure that the value consulting or value engineering department just doesn't become a business case factory churning out these assessments, but really, how does a charter help to kind of create that more strategic, position them as more strategic value orchestrators?
Yeah. Well, I think this was, going back to my time at Splunk, I had been using value selling, but I'd never really built the program from scratch myself. And so when I came into Splunk and I joined, I was working for Bart Finelli and Tom Schodorf, our CRO. They didn't give me like, hey, here's the job spec and here are the 10 things I need you to do. They were very, very open. Hey, come in and help us, do a better job in this area, win more and win bigger and all that. And what I found very quickly was, especially talking to others who had done it in other companies, there's 2 types of value teams. There's sort of one value team that ends up in the back office, cranking out spreadsheets, because the perception of value is it's a checkbox and it's a spreadsheet. ROI, where's the ROI? It's got to be in every proposal. Okay, give me a spreadsheet, calculate that, put it in every proposal. It doesn't help. Customer's going to crumble it up. Why? Because they're your numbers, they're not the customer's numbers. Because the process, you didn't go through the process. Because you don't have a deck that tells the whole story. And so like, if you want to be a real value team that has real impact across the business, you need to make your charter large. My view in the organization, when I was leading them, it was, we are here to help the field create, grow, and speed pipeline to close. End of story. So we will do anything that helps any of those goals. So we'll help build point of view documents for the field early in so that they can use them for prospecting or positioning up front about the potential value our solution could have. We'll help them do research and all of that. We'll help, build the business cases. We'll review the work that they've done. We'll work with the SE team to make sure that the business case elements are tied into the POC. When you start thinking bigger about what you do, we got to the point at Splunk where the product team was coming to us and saying, hey, would you prioritize this feature list that we're thinking about for next quarter by the value you believe the customer will be getting? So when you really embed your program, create a really important charter, make it a really big and strategic job, not just about executing on deals, but rather on how you can enable others in the organization, how you can evangelize out to the marketplace, and then how you can evolve how we do it. And the Mediafly, platform allows you to do that evolutionary work, making it so much easier and faster, and having all the data to be able to say who's having the success and look at the impact of this, and doing it for, we talk about people as the alternative, right? We're not talking about, the cost of it's not like it's the equivalent of hiring 20 people. It's very reasonable, and as a result of that, it's once you have all this proof, it's very reasonable to get the approval to do it, because it's helping you not have to hire another 10 value consultants.
Absolutely. That's a great answer, Doug. And yeah, we're seeing more of a trend toward what you're talking about. More of these value groups being, in the thick of things. As you mentioned, even product development being brought in. What's the potential value of this new thing we're working on, which I think is amazing, versus the number crunchers, with pencil sharpeners in the back office. So love to see that evolution.
Yeah, I mean, every part of the go-to-market, there's the website. So the website should be oriented around value. I should probably be a little calculator there that helps me get a quick back of the napkin and say, hey, this is something I should probably look at. Customer success after the sale should be using the baseline things to measure the go forward. I mean, again, when you think about this, think big. If you're a value leader, think big. You can't do it overnight, so you got to prioritize, but make it big, make the charter big, because when it's big, you end up having a much bigger platform off of which to show value. And when it comes down to tight times, and we talked early on here, Dan, about how when customers are buying and economic times get tough, they focus on the top 3 things. Well, inside your organization, if your organization is going through a tough time, they're going to start looking for things that they can get rid of. What can we live without? And all I can tell you is I never want that to be me, and I never want that to be my teams. We are always going to be aligned to make sure that we are perceived to be one of those things that helps the company in the top 3 things in our company. And that's why I think the charter is so critical.
Agreed.
Excellent. We've got one more question, I think, before we wrap up today. This one is from Alex. What sorts of roles and responsibility segmentation do you see between value consultants and sales reps? From your most successful value programs, who's been responsible for owning what?
Well, it's a great question. When you're starting, the value team probably takes on the vast burden of, helping people do the really good account research and the really good decks and the really good models and the really good proposals that come out of all of that stuff. Over time, as you're scaling, though, you have to start, sort of segmenting those out. So it's a great question. Gavin Edgley, who runs the value team at Databricks now, he's done a fabulous job with this, where, over time, when you get mature in your program, there are different types of services that you offer as a value team. Sometimes it's a lightweight service, where you're helping maybe with a quick point of view, or maybe a sort of peer analysis. There's like a medium, and then there's also a large, like a full on, okay, we're coming in and we're going to talk to a bunch of people. And what he did is this beautiful job sort of outlining the roles and responsibilities and then articulating that back to the field. Hey, if you're the AE and you have an opportunity that looks like this, here's what we're going to do for you, and here's what you're responsible for. Of course, we're not leaving them on their own to do all that stuff. We're teaching them. We're providing them templates of what good looks like or great looks like. And then we'll review it with them before they go out and use it with the customer. We don't want them to go fail. But what that was really helping us do was scale. And we were getting to the point where, the demand for Databricks is so great, it still is, obviously. And the value team services were in super high demand. that we had to find a way to go from being able to support, 30 or 40 AEs per value consultant to supporting 100 or even more. I think when I was there, we had a couple of our value consultants supporting 120 AEs. And if you're not being prescriptive about what types of services you're going to deliver and then who's responsible for what components of each one of those services, you're going to have a problem, right? Where your team's just going to get burnt out. They're working on low value tasks. The sales team is acting like the spoiled brat and just, hey, value team, I need your help. Salespeople are incredibly capable. You just got to make it easy for them. Give them the templates. It's a lot easier to follow a template and something that's already been created. And when you give them a great model to use or a great application to use, they're going to do the work.
Agreed.
Excellent. Well, I think that is it for today. I'm going to throw up one last poll for our attendees. This is just if you are interested in learning more about our value selling tools. This is a great opportunity to let us know, and we'll make sure folks reach out to you. But otherwise, I want to thank everyone who joined today for being here, and a special thanks to Doug for coming and sharing his knowledge. This has been an incredible conversation. And Dan, thanks to you as well for helping to facilitate and really getting these golden nuggets out of Doug. I can't thank you enough, both for being here and leading this excellent conversation.
No, thanks. Something I'm very passionate about, and thank you guys for all your support over the years.
Same, Doug. Thank you, and wishing you the best at Harness. And
thank you.
Come back and see us. We'll have a follow-up conversation. There's a lot we didn't get to.
That's right. Yeah, sounds good.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Bye now.